People love Edgar Wright for his editing, and we all know that. There's a bunch of video essays and articles explaining and praising his style. The swish pans, crash zooms, match cuts, transition wipes, visual gags, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Edgar Wright has an identifiable style, and it's great. I'm a huge fan. And while people laud Wright for his editing, visuals, and comedy, there aren't as many people talking about the narratives themselves. A similar predicament to Wes Anderson in a way. Their strong visual direction has people overlook the core of what makes their movies uniquely theirs from a narrative standpoint. So, what are Wright's movies about? If you lined up all of his movies, what's something that immediately stands out? Here's what we see. We see that his work exudes a love for media and pop culture. Whether it's expressed through his characters or how his movies are structured, his movies just bleed adoration for the subject Wright is focusing on. So his characters often have personal connections to music, movies, or video games.
Does anyone know what Gary's doing?
He's playing Need for Speed over there.
Sometimes it's a purely aesthetic choice, other times it's a core character trait, often used for laughs, but it's also used to say something about a character's history and how they carry themselves in their world. And in the case of Hot Fuzz, it's both used as a laugh and as a way to define Danny Butterman's personality. And if the characters themselves aren't expressing adoration for some sort of media, the movie's mise-en-scene will be the one expressing that love.
You can't see this very well, but actually this is Bub's Pizza, which is a reference to the amazing zombie in Day of the Dead played by Howard Sherman. And when you're making a movie, like, if you have to make up businesses, it's always like, well, this is a great way to cram in lots of like film references. So this was our kind of like little tribute to George Romero's Day of the Dead.
And another quirk of Wright's work is his deliberate use of genre tropes, and how he recontextualizes them. And while most of his movies are comedies, they're not malicious parodies. His movies don't exist to mock genre tropes, but to celebrate them by using them with earnestness. So what's the result of this? What if a romantic comedy was set in a zombie apocalypse? What if a young adult teen movie turned into an action movie? And what if an American action movie was set in the UK? And Wright's ability to play around with genre conventions is one of his greatest strengths. His work gives off the feeling that he wants you to know that you're watching a movie, or at least that's the vibe I get. And this is not done as a crutch, but as a way to say, hey, media is pretty cool. And I feel that through how the characters interact with their stuff, it means something to his characters, first and foremost.
You actually listen to this granny? How old are you?
These inclusions and references are never too self-indulgent either. There's no, let's hold on the shot so people can clap and cheer moment. There's no moments for the audience, just moments for characters.
Purple Rain. No. Sign of the Times.
Definitely not.
The Batman soundtrack.
Throw it.
And if the reference goes over your head, you can still enjoy the moment all the same. Like, Baby Driver doesn't become a terrible movie if you don't know any of the songs. Or something like Spaced doesn't become terrible if you don't know any of the movie references.
He took forever, and ever, and ever.
Oh, and speaking of Spaced, another common thing in Wright's work is Simon Pegg's help on scriptwriting duties, and as his lead man. Having first worked together on Asylum, we really start seeing Wright's style come into its own with his work on Spaced, directed by Edgar and written and created by Simon and Jessica. Now, if you don't know, Spaced is about a bunch of people finding all sorts of ways to waste their time. It's basically a slice-of-life sitcom about slackers. And what this show tried to accomplish is portray the mundane life of 20-somethings through the lens of the media the trio grew up with. You know, imagining what their lives would be like through this lens.
Both of you have said this in the past, the idea that this show is what they imagine their lives are like. So it's done in this, especially in the second series, it takes on this even more sort of overblown genre style, because that's how they recount kind of like these stories. So like a sort of a clubbing becomes this massive epic, you know, the paintballing becomes a massive epic, you know, Daisy working in a kitchen becomes like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So it was a really great way of like taking things that we loved and trying to put it through relatable incidents, you know?
And with this concoction, the show becomes a vehicle for wacky and surreal scenarios, while embracing the self-referential pop culture wave that was happening in the States.
Dad here watched Empire and Jedi last week, and ever since he's been trying to do the Jedi mind trick.
So you begin to see where the magic starts to bubble up. This isn't to dismiss Wright's directorial debut with A Fistful of Fingers, which already has his style on full display in certain parts, but Spaced and Wright's films are more closely related because of the subject matter and themes explored. And a recurring theme in Wright's work is nostalgia and romanticizing the past. Aesthetically, the 2010 Scott Pilgrim comic book adaptation actually looks like a campy comic book while faithfully bringing to life the comics arcade game aesthetic. 2007's Hot Fuzz is greatly inspired by American action movies, with Danny Butterman enjoying said movies.
Point Break or Bad Boys 2.
And Shaun has his vinyls, and he reminisces about playing Tekken 2 5 years ago.
Alright, I admit, he can be pretty funny on occasion. Like that time we stayed up all night drinking apple schnapps and playing Tekken 2.
When was that?
That was 5 years ago.
And while nostalgia and romanticizing is comforting, they're also used to harm Wright's characters. Shaun is reminded that the good times have already passed in that scene. We have Soho's Eloise realizing the horrors of the decade she loved, or the romanticizing of Ramona brings out the worst in Scott.
I broke up with her.
And was she cool with that?
Knives is with young Neil now. She's totally cool with it.
You sure about that?
Yeah, she's very mature for her age. We had a very healthy breakup. We're all peaches and gravy.
And by being critical of our relationship with nostalgia and romanticizing things, this is where Wright's work feels like an evolution to Spaced. While Spaced revels in the fun of being a slacker in your 20s, Shaun is almost like a soft sequel to Spaced, where you don't move on from that slacker phase, and then you feel that wash of disappointment and existential dread in your late 20s.
Yeah, you?
Yeah, I just bought a place, actually.
Bought?
I know, bit glow up, eh?
And I think that's where Wright's movies are at their best, when they really hone in on this dance with wanting to relive the good old days and not really preparing for the future. It taps into the escapism that we seek in the media we indulge in. Maybe that's why the past in media, whether it be literal or subtextual, is so intertwined with these themes in Wright's movies. Baby has his iPod not only as a way to block out his tinnitus, but as a way to connect with his mother. Gary King still has his old car, clothes, personality, and wants to revisit some familiar places because he just wants to relive his past. And Ed is symbolic of Shaun's Peter Pan syndrome, as he's metaphorically and literally being held back because of him and what he represents.
Stop defending him, Shaun! All he ever does is hold you back! Or does it make your life easier having someone around who's more of a loser than you are?
And hey, you might look at me and go, oh come on, they're just fun comedy movies, just don't think about it too much. To which I say, yeah, they are, but I find this part of his movies fun too. And it's not like I'm finding meaning in nothing, at least I think I'm not for the most part. Wright has acknowledged that there is a common thread of themes throughout the Cornetto trilogy, and he's tired of sci-fi and horror movies that are just surface level thrills. Then you've got Peg saying that he likes having audiences think about what the movies are offering. So it's not unreasonable to think Wright is attempting to say something with his work, especially when it strengthens the material for me. And while I'm all for a good dumb laugh, what Wright is attempting to say with his movies is what interests me more. And that's why I love Wright's stuff. To me, his work is just pure fun and a celebration of film, while also taking itself seriously and sincerely, which I think is the reason why people like his movies. Fellow directors enjoy his work, he's helped turn a Canadian comic into a cult classic and an anime series, and Sony is eager to get Baby Driver 2 on a roll. So let's just take the opportunity to celebrate Wright's work so far, specifically diving into the themes of his movies. We all know his movies are funny and well crafted from a technical standpoint, so let's see what these movies are actually trying to say. And for the sake of it, let's rank them all on a completely subjective tier list that you shouldn't take seriously. These opinions are my own, so if you disagree with me, then whatever, I don't care. Oh, and before we begin, this little guy is now available. but only for a limited time. They're only $29.99 with 20% off if you're a part of my Patreon, which is basically a free discount since my Patreon's got a free trial period. If we make it to 200 sales, my cute little avatar gets made, and if not, this boy ain't seen the light of day. So remember, you've got a small window to get him before he's gone forever. Thanks to Makeshift for helping me make this little guy, and the link's down below if you want to buy him and, you know, want to support me. Now back to the video. As a 20-year-old fueled by the love of westerns with a shoestring budget with his friends, Wright made Fistful of Fingers, a movie about the man with no name who pursues the squint because he killed his horse. I know I just said earlier that we'll strictly be focusing on what Wright's movies are trying to say, but this movie has nothing to say. It just wants to be a fun homage parody pastiche to westerns, a la Naked Gun or Airplane. So it is what it is, so let's take it for what it is. And what it is not good. From a purely technical perspective, Fingers blatantly looks like a no-budget first attempt at a feature-length film. The low resolution makes certain visual gags hard to read, the lack of dynamic range makes these noir shots unflattering, and this otherwise funny audio gag kinda hurts my ears. Also, the character acting is amateurish, the actors definitely don't look their age, the comedic timing could be better at times.
Oh dear.
And there's just some jokes that are undercooked or just didn't age well. And adjacent to that is this use of brownface. At least there is an attempt at a joke here. This is in reference to Hollywood casting white actors with brownface as opposed to someone of that race playing that role. So there's at least a jab and a critique of this trope, you know, showing the absurdity of it. But it's a fairly surface level one. It's just an acknowledgement of this thing existing, but never going beyond that, which shows how much Wright has grown and matured with his comedy in his future movies, with much better clever setups and critiques. But here's the thing, from the technical issues, amateurish quality, and jokes that haven't aged well, what's there to gain from this movie? If you're a fan of Wright, it's seeing how distinct his direction was, even back in the day.
You missed me. Wanna bet?
What a remarkable show for the man with no name. Let's just see that again.
It's impressive how clear his fingerprints are here. Motivated camera movements, quick jokes, visual gags, and look, even the rapid succession of crash zooms. It's great seeing the inception of this. But the one thing that sets this apart from Wright's other more recent work is that this leans more on being a parody movie. A lot of Looney Tunes logic and fourth wall breaking that got good laughs out of me. Also, look at how dumb this horse looks. I like it a lot. So yeah, I think Fingers is worth a watch if you're a Wright completionist. The clever visual gags and the effort displayed exude so much charm that I can't help but appreciate it. You can feel the fun these guys had while making it. There was obviously going to be limitations to this movie, but for what it is, it's pretty good. But if you're watching it as a proper film from 1995 or just like within the context of Wright's catalog, it's not good. It's got the charm of like a college project, but you know, it's not something you'd go out of your way to check out. D+, a great effort, but it isn't great. But what this movie proves though, is that Wright was a diamond in the rough. And we see his skills get a little bit more refined throughout the years as he works on different things. And while Spaced is arguably where his visual style reaches its final form, I think his project after Spaced is where his narrative work starts to truly shine.
It's Liz for you.
Pardon me, my local grocer, Woolies, didn't have any cornetto, so we got Peter's drumstick as a substitute, so I hope that doesn't break the illusion. As I said before, Shaun of the Dead feels like a soft sequel to Spaced, but the movie decides to ground itself in reality by expressing some real-world anxieties. And how the movie explores those anxieties, and how those are represented through Shaun's inadequacy and inaction, is great. At the age of 29, Shaun can't seem to fulfill his expectations. He's in a job that could easily be done by teens, he doesn't know how to make time for his mom, he resents his stepfather.
Perhaps you could bring the flowers you forgot to bring Barbara on Mother's Day. I was gonna.
His girlfriend dumps him, and a colleague of his is doing much better than him in just about every aspect. And all of this just makes him feel frustrated.
No, sorry, we just gave away the last table.
But Shaun's comfortable, though that comfort is intertwined with the reluctance to grow up. And Ed is a symbol of his stagnant comfort, what's holding him back from his adulthood.
Just be nice if we could spend a bit more time together.
Bollocks.
Just the two of us.
Kid.
Ed is fun, the Winchester is familiar, and getting drunk, staying up, and just having a good time without worrying about work after a bad breakup is just the type of thing he wants right now. But that sort of thing is closing off other opportunities in his life. And by the time a worldwide disaster hits, Shaun desperately tries to catch up on lost time and attempts to make some changes in his life, to take some initiative. But it's too late to do so. He didn't know how to juggle his normal life, which is then transferred over into his cluelessness in the apocalypse. So much so that even the Winchester, a backup plan to save a dinner date.
Liz, can we just talk about this? Let's go out.
What, to the Winchester?
Do you want to?
Is also the plan to save his relationships. The relationships he's already severed by his inadequacy as an adult, which then translates to the death of his companions, and the dramatic irony of Shaun getting out of his mindlessness through the mindlessness of zombies, which then leads to him severing his best friend.
Come on, we're getting out of here.
I might just stay here.
Yeah, but we can get out.
I think you two should make a go of it.
What are you talking about?
I only got you back.
But despite losing a lot during the outbreak, it turns out not all was lost. Society has adapted to a new norm, Shaun managed to patch up his relationship, and Ed is still around. He's just locked away in Shaun's shed. Shaun has finally grown up, and Ed's presence could be symbolic of Shaun still enjoying certain qualities from his young adulthood, while, keeping it at a safe distance. Or you could just toss that all in the trash and just enjoy the movie for being a funny working title zombie rom-com. It's an impressive technical feat for a sophomore film, and what Pegg and Wright created is fantastic. Also, love the way Pegg looks here while he's yelling. It's really goofy. But truth be told though, the reason why I love this movie a lot more now is because of how relatable Shaun is as a 26-year-old myself. The thought of the future drowning me in consequences because of my comfort, inaction, or inadequacy, that terrifies me. And as wacky as the situation is, I felt the genuine dread of Shaun and what the apocalypse meant to him. It's a story about being so stuck in your own head that you don't witness the disaster that has already fallen upon you. So you do what you can do. And your comfort and inaction makes the things you want to do impossible. It's too late. But you still gotta grow up.
Oh no! Come on, stop it! Mom, please, don't go!
Great stories tend to tap into specific personal feelings at the right place, at the right time. And a good horror movie is all about creating symbolism and having that strike you to your core. And Shaun of the Dead, a horror movie about someone's quarter-life crisis, does that for me. A+. Why not S? I'll let you know in the end, but for now, it's time for a cop movie. Now, with my high praise of Shaun of the Dead, how does Hot Fuzz fare?
Right.
I love this movie for being stupid fun. It's self-referential, it's full of fun and obvious cliches, and the title itself continues the trend of nonsensical action movie names. It's an action movie that loves being an action movie, while being a goofy cult horror comedy. But did I get the same emotional catharsis that I did with Shaun? No, not really. Probably because this is the goofiest movie in Wright's trilogy, even though there is a message. Angel, our protagonist, has dedicated his entire life to his work. Unfortunately though, this causes some difficulty when connecting with others. He has no friends, he's not emotionally available for his girlfriend, and his department ends up sending him off to a town with no recorded crime because he makes everyone look bad, and unsurprisingly, no one misses him. As uptight as Angel is, the person to teach him how to have fun and think about people outside of himself is his buddy in this buddy cop movie, Danny Butterman. So as Angel attempts to uncover the mysterious murders of a statistically crimeless town, Danny shows him how to let loose and enjoy his time. But it takes a while to get there.
Patrick Swayze's just robbed this bank. Keanu Reeves is chasing him through people's gardens. And he goes to shoot Swayze, but he can't because he loves him so much. And he's firing his gun up in the air. And he's like, oh.
Have
you ever fired your gun up in the air and gone, ah?
No, I have not ever fired my gun up in the air and gone, ah.
Highs and lows occur, and it turns out the crimeless town is actually full of crime. All of this was done by a cult led by Butterman's dad, who wants to honor his wife's goal, to win Village of the Year. And he's gonna do it at all costs. And of course, it gets very emotional. So Butterman's dad is supposed to contrast Angel's selfishness, where both people are foregoing everything for the sake of one goal. While one doubles down to the point of murdering people that might stand in the way of their goal, Angel decides to open up and shifts their priorities. He realizes the importance of connection and that there are other things in life beyond frivolous, selfish pursuits, like cool action movies and having a buddy. So cool, pretty neat message. But, you know, I just see Hot Fuzz as one big fun movie.
It's Frank! He's appointing himself judge, jury, and executioner! He's not judge, jury, and executioner! He is!
Much like Spaced, Hot Fuzz is pretty much a bunch of silly cartoon characters going on a silly adventure. And because of this goofiness, I don't find Angel's feelings as sincere as Shaun's feelings, therefore making the movie's narrative less impactful to me. And this isn't me condemning the film for deliberately being this fun film, I just think my preferences lean into something like the sincerity of Shaun over Fuzz's energy. And speaking of preferences, I don't think the action scenes in Fuzz aren't all that great. Good, but not great. These are really funny gags, but visually, they're a bit too hectic for my liking. The amount of cuts the action scenes have feels snappy in a jarring way, especially when you compare the action scenes to Wright's later movies, where the action is more legible and you're not losing track of anything. But maybe this is a reference to how action movies love their cuts, and that satirization makes sense, but I still think I prefer something like the bar scene in The World's End. It's a lot more legible here, and you know, it's still funny, and it's a lot more interesting to look at for me personally than anything in Hot Fuzz. And even with this complaint, I'm willing to put Hot Fuzz at like a B+, cause like, it's just a really, really, really good time. I just prefer Wright's other movies over this one.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Let me tell you why I love a movie about a guy who needs to beat 7 evil exes to date a girl he just met. I was 13 when I first saw Scott Pilgrim vs. the World in cinemas, and it wasn't anything like I've ever seen before, as dramatic as that sounds. It's the movie that got me into movies. Like, it made me look into the production of this sort of stuff, and you know, it made me find out about like screenwriters, directors, and you know, I found Edgar Wright and stuff. And it got me into this mindset because of how like unique the visuals were, how funny the comedy was, and most importantly, it really appealed to my young teenage boy brain. Yo, video games are neat, fighting is neat, music is neat, video game fighting with music is really neat. It really appealed to my adolescence, so this movie to me was just one big comedic adventure about a dork who's actually kinda cool, who gets the girl in the end. This movie has a self-insert quality to it if you're a dumb kid who's attracted to this kind of thing. Like me, or at least like I was before. But my feelings of the movie have obviously shifted since I first saw it as a 13-year-old. Like, I don't think Scott's a cool guy anymore. Now, as an adult, I don't want to be around someone who uses a high school girl as an emotional rebound. But that's kind of the point, right? Scott is supposed to be this immature asshole to show that he's grown by the end of the story. And yeah, you're right. Like Wright's other films, Scott has themes of growing up, adolescence, and bettering oneself in the narrative. And the movie has a different quality to it once you grow up and, you know, watch it through a different perspective. So how does it fare compared to Wright's other films? It's probably the weakest out of the bunch, but don't let that fool you though. The movie still has a lot of narrative merit. Ramona is a subversive take on the manic pixie dream girl, whose lack of character exemplifies how careless and uninterested Scott is of others. We don't know anything about Ramona because Scott doesn't know either. Scott literally has a song called Ramona that describes nothing about her beyond her name.
Can't wait to hear when it's finished.
Finished?
It's a love at first sight movie that tackles how harmful young, shallow romance is, and how that negatively affects people who come in contact with someone like Scott.
We need groundswell. We need stalkers.
Turns out, fighting other people for a girl, no matter how strong or witty you are, isn't gonna fix your relationships. You're gonna need to do a bit of self-reflection. And that's great. The movie achieves in relaying that message. Well, not so much in the theatrical ending, but more so in the original ending that was replaced.
The ending's unrealistic. The Ramona flowers I know would be on to the next one.
Ramona leaving Scott in the end just made more sense to me. They didn't know each other all that well, their relationship was just as shallow as the other exes, so best end it here. A great setup with a great ending. But then Scott ends up with a 17-year-old, which makes this feel all kinda icky, especially when a lot of the cast call them out for dating a high schooler.
17 years old, scandal.
Even I would think twice about dating a 17-year-old. Scott's mourning period is officially over. He's totally dating a high schooler.
Dating a high schooler is the mourning period.
How old are you now, Scott? Like 28?
I'm not playing your little games, kids.
So you've been out of high school for like 13 years.
I'm 22. 22.
Knives was being taken advantage of and shouldn't forgive Scott so quickly. Scott shouldn't be rewarded with a girl just by apologizing in either ending. Acknowledging your mistakes is the first step, and it's a great first step, but that doesn't entitle you to a girlfriend. It's literally the bare minimum to being like a decent person. It's the reason why the power of self-respect is more powerful than the power of love. And I think taking accountability and growing up is a great enough reward at the end of Scott's journey. Because, you know, a girl isn't gonna fix how awful of a person he is. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail in this video since I already made another video where I praise and criticize this movie, but long story short, as far as subversive manic pixie dream girls go, 500 Days of Summer does Scott's story better. And while I can name a few movies that surpass Scott Pilgrim in individual ways, it's kinda hard to find a movie that does everything Scott does. It's a martial art action late 2000s indie romantic urban fantasy comedy musical of a comic book adaptation. A Canadian comic that borrows a lot of its style and influence from video games and Japanese animation and manga. And the movie embraces every little aspect about it, and I love this movie for that. It juxtaposes this fun creative style with how crappy and immature Scott is, as he would rather distract himself with this video game type adventure rather than do like the responsible thing.
You have to break up with Knives. That poor angel. Today.
But it's hard.
But then, the consequences of his actions catches up with him. So, he has to get a life and do the right thing.
Right.
You know, we'll have my revenge!
No, Knives, I hurt you. I cheated on you.
The movie presents this coming-of-age narrative in such a creative format that it greatly outweighs whatever problem I have with the film. This mix of ideas and genres gave me a sense of wonder in film that I've been trying to recapture ever since. And the only movie to recapture that sense of wonder and fun for cinema was Everything Everywhere All at Once. It took a whole decade later. Not to say that Scott Pilgrim is the best movie I've seen since Everything Everywhere. There have been amazing and much better movies I've seen since then. But it's this purely subjective feeling of, oh shit, movies can be like this, is what awestruck me about Scott Pilgrim. The soundtrack, the visuals, the comedy, everything about it. Pretty much perfect to me. Well, almost. But you know, I obviously have nostalgia for this movie, so I won't deny its flaws and my biases. So I have to reluctantly give Scott Pilgrim a B+, because the ending sours an otherwise perfect run of a movie for me. But you know, whatever.
I don't know what you're talking about. What the heck was that for?
Did you know that Peg's favorite out of the entire trilogy is The World's End? It's not hard to see why. Out of the three, I think it has the best action, most interesting premise, and arguably has the best pacing, editing, and acting. And I specifically like how The World's End feels like it's further expanding on Shaun's themes. While Shaun resolves the Peter Pan syndrome of a man in his late 20s, World peers into the life of a 40-year-old boy who never got over that and explores this self-destructive behavior. This is Gary King, whose biggest highlight of his life was his failed attempt at the Golden Mile pub crawl with his friends. Still reminiscing about this day, he wants to do it right and get the gang back together 20 years later after their first try. But things don't go according to plan because aliens. And because everyone has pretty much moved on from their youth and are now living their adult lives. As the trilogy takes on sci-fi, World uses aliens as a literal way to convey how alien it feels to revisit something you're nostalgic for. Everything feels the same, but it's different. The places you used to frequent have regulars who don't recognize you.
I'm Gary King.
The places you used to go to are completely replaced, and the people you used to be good friends with are just now different people.
Sorry, can we have 4 of those and a tap water, please?
What?
And the gang fighting back these aliens, which is a metaphor turned literal, is them fighting against change. But no matter how hard they try, some changes are inevitable, and you can't really return to the home you remembered. Metaphorically and literally, because the world ends in the end of the world's end. And I like the metaphors of this movie a lot. Besides the exploration of nostalgia and growing up and all that stuff, the aliens are symbolic of corporations, robbing the individuality of towns by starbucking its establishments. Blanks is an apt name for an alien race that aims to eradicate individualism and its flaws. And the Blanks threatening to kill others who don't conform is reflective of this adapt or die narrative that corporations push on us. A techno-savior complex that promises a better life for everyone, but ignores the lives that this change ruins, assuming the change is an actual benefit to anyone. And all of this is in service of capturing the desperation of a man trying to relive the good times, trying to outrun change, and to a really depressing degree.
You need help, Gary.
I got help. You know what help was? Help was a lot of people sitting in a circle talking about how awful things had got.
But at least there's some hope at the end. While change is inevitable, King and his remaining friends can at least fight for the change they want.
What did he say?
Saying we're a bunch of f***ups.
Hey! It is our basic human right to be f***ups!
It's our duty to challenge you.
Just leave us to our own devices, you intergalactic assholes.
You misunderstand.
Shut up!
We are trying.
Nobody's listening!
If you
battle!
It's pointless arguing with you. You will be left to your own devices.
Really?
With the network hive mind gone, the leaderless Blanks becoming individuals, and in a status quo where humans hate the Blanks, King, in this new world, aims to do good this time around. So King embarks on another quest, not for selfish reasons, but for a cause greater than himself. He now adventures to fight for equality for the blanks, all the while being sober.
5 waters, please.
And I think this is great. As initially jarring as the ending was when I first saw it, making sense of it by writing this script made me appreciate the movie's ending a whole lot more. There's just a lot of smaller details and setups that become a lot clearer on rewatches that counteract my initial grievances.
There is nothing ooh-ducky about being teetotal. About walking into a pub after a rugby match and ordering a tap water at a bar packed full of big ugly bastards wearing war paint. That, my friend, takes confidence, yeah? I'm talking balls.
You said it, Puff.
So yeah, this movie is great. I love this movie. I just love that this film is just filled to the brim with subtext. Subtextually, I think it's probably the densest Wright movie, with a lot of ways to interpret this film. But personally, I think the one I shared with you makes the most sense to me. So is this my favorite movie out of the 3? It's close, but no, I don't think so. I think I'm still a bit iffy on a few things symbolically, but none of that is really detrimental to my experience. So Shaun is still my favorite. Maybe it's because I'm a bit more sentimental towards it. But The World's End is a close second though. I don't even like men. Baby Driver easily could have been just a cool idea without much thought to the story. What if the whole movie was shot like a music video? Let's have cuts, camera movements, sound effects, and blocking matched to the beat of a soundtrack. That would be neat, right? And it is. It provides a unique experience to an otherwise simple heist movie about a getaway driver with a sad backstory trying to repay his debt. But what elevates this movie a lot is the why. Why bring so much attention to the music? It's because we see this movie through Baby's perspective, and how Baby uses music not only as a way to block out tinnitus, but as a coping mechanism in 2 ways. 1. It's a way to deal with the grief of his dead mother, and a way to connect with her. 2. It's a way for him to feel in control of a situation he has no control of. This second reason is fairly ironic too, because without music, Baby literally has no control. Even when a song is slightly out of sync, he can't help but feel the need to control this one small aspect.
Let's go. Wait. I gotta start the song over.
We see this theme showcased most literally with the music he produces, sampling these criminals he'd rather not associate with and then make it his own through a remix. Baby feels guilty for doing these heists, but Wright says that this was Baby's way to deal with his guilt, by mythologizing himself. But while Baby's situation is extreme, Wright wanted to make sure that Baby's use of music felt relatable, paralleling how we soundtrack our everyday lives as like a means of escape, like a crappy job or a commute to work. At least you have some control over what's going on in your ears, you know? And then to take this concept and then make every shot, movement, and gesture to be in sync with a song, the precision and technical skill required to do all this is just fantastic. In a lot of ways, Baby Driver is Wright's current magnum opus from a technical perspective. The perfect soundtrack to a movie with fun stunts, an effective plot, and great synergy with the cast. Ansel Elgort, great. John Hamm, great. Jamie Foxx, great. And anyway, Wright by all metrics has pretty much created an A+, right? Almost. I've just got one issue. The mediocre romance. Look, Deborah is a cute and charming character, but my feelings for her start and end there. She's not a character, she's a plot device for Baby. And I get it, she's got nothing going on in her life, and she just wants like tunes, a car, and a destination, or, you know, whatever she says. A simple dream Baby shares with her, and that's fine enough. And I get it's supposed to be a love at first sight romance. I just wish her simplicity and shallowness was a bit more interesting or purposeful, like 500 Days of Summer or Scott Pilgrim respectively. Because compared to other movies, Deborah and her chemistry with Baby felt bland to me. I wish they did kind of more musically things together, you know? I don't know, do a little jig, do some dances, I don't know. As a result, heartfelt moments that were present in Worlds and Shaun aren't as strong in Baby. And since a significant chunk of the movie revolves around this romance, how does it affect my enjoyment of the film? Meh, not so much. Sure, while I may not care about their romance, I at least care about Baby. And at least their scenes kinda look nice and cute. So if you're here to get a good romance film, don't bother. But if you're here to have some fun or appreciate the craft and themes, yes, totally. Baby Driver is a great film, A-. I'll be honest, I'm kinda out of my depth with this one. While I do enjoy documentaries, I can't say I watched a lot of music related ones, so my frame of reference to judge this film is quite narrow. But in saying that, I did have a good time with this film about Sparks. For those who don't know, Sparks are this influential band who are known for not being known, or at least more than they should be. A band that ends up inspiring others that we may be more familiar with. Or at the very least, they're a band for artists, like Paul McCartney. He's even referencing them in this music video. That's how you know that they've made it within these circles. And as subjects, they've got quite a history to dive into. With their 50 years of experience making music, that's over 25 albums worth of songs. And Wright's documentary is basically an overview of a band's history that was swept right under our noses. And the most interesting thing about them in this film, beyond their eccentric personalities, is their persistence and authenticity. Throughout the years, they've been blessed and cursed, making it big in some years, but barely getting by on others. But throughout it all, there's one thing that's always remained true about them. Sparks makes music for themselves. If they just so happen to make a hit and coincidentally be a part of a zeitgeist, then great. And if not, then whatever. They're making music for the craft, and they want to try something new all the time. Cause they don't want to be a tribute band to their own hits. And I admire their boldness and creativity, and I like hearing people geek out about this band. And this is what the documentary is all about, just people geeking out about this band. And I had a good time. I had fun with it. I may not love the band on the same level as Wright's guests, but there's a couple of songs that I did enjoy quite a bit. Coincidentally too, Sparks were in town around the same time I was writing this script, so I decided to see them live to see what they're all about. Maybe it'll change my mind. And I ended up coming out as a bigger fan. Their dynamic is charming, I think their music is better live, and I could feel the same excitement the guests had on the documentary in that venue. The documentary made me understand why people love Sparks, while witnessing them made me feel that love. The documentary condensed such a long-running history in a digestible way that I was feeling the same hype as the much older crowd around me. Understanding the significance and context of the songs made the concert so much more enjoyable for me. It was a great experience, and I thank this love letter of a documentary for convincing me to check these guys out. And because this is Wright's love letter for a band he loves, I think the movie ends up being the least Wright looking movie. So if you're gonna watch this documentary expecting that recognizable Edgar Wright kinetic visual flair, you're not gonna get that here. And I think that's a good thing. This is a documentary about Sparks. If Wright decided to be a bit more forward with his visual style, I feel like the movie would draw more focus onto him, as opposed to this band that he clearly loves and wants to share with you. The movie still exudes quite a bit of style though. Recounted stories are often accompanied by some well-made animations, though I wish each style was spread out more evenly. So is this my favorite new music documentary? It's good, but I don't think so. I think the Kenny G doco still takes a spot for me. But, I'm glad Wright took a chance at making a documentary. I'm giving it a B.
Okay, and can we please, if we might have a little souvenir of our last night here in Australia so we can remember this night and how amazing all of you were forever. Can we take a little photo with all of you, please? Since I went to the trouble to buy an Australia shirt today. So, okay, this better be good.
alone, that life is getting you lonely, you can always go.
When I heard Edgar Wright was doing a non-comedy horror movie, I assumed it was going to be similar to Jordan Peele's work. Comedic roots are still present, but largely it's gonna focus on the horror. But no, the movie has little to no comedy. Last Night in Soho is straight up a horror film. And because of that, the kinetic, energetic comedy that you've come to expect out of Wright's films is instead replaced with more technically impressive, moody visuals. The use of mirrors and Texas switches are notable, and the other world generally feels dreamlike. And that's cool and all, but without any comedy, that means we're getting a Wright movie that needs to have its drama stand on its own. And this is where the movie suffers most notably. So in Soho, we follow Eloise, who goes to college for fashion. She feels ostracized by her colleagues and decides to live in a shady hotel instead of her dorm. And here, every night, she gets transported to the 60s, an era she greatly romanticizes and what her work is mostly inspired by. And whenever she crosses into the past, she gets to relive the life of a lady named Sandy, who's tried to make it in showbiz. And like most horror movies, things end up turning for the worst.
I'm not on her!
So how'd the movie turn out? It's fine, pretty, but sometimes it's kinda bad. The romantic interest was uninteresting, Jack was obviously gonna be a bad guy, saw Miss Collins being Sandy a mile away, and the red herring felt unintentionally comical.
I make it my business to know all the pretty girls around here. All their problems. Always have done. You smoke, don't you, love?
Poor bastard. Call an ambulance, Pet. Now! And tell him he used to be police. That'll make them hurry.
He's police.
Yeah, he's ex-vice. He used to be a copper in Soho for years and years, working the red light district. Now look at him.
He's needlessly creepy and cryptic sounding, and he feels more at home in Hot Fuzz than this horror film. And most notably, the movie's plot felt like a proper step down compared to Wright's previous films. And as much as I like the direction of the movie, I wasn't interested in Eloise's journey and the world she was exploring. Something like Coraline's world filled me with wonder, and it interested me more the further we delved into the movie. And while Soho initially captured my sense of wonder, it quickly devolved into disinterest when things started revealing itself. Who would have thought that women were being exploited? Who would have thought that Jack was being a bad guy? Who would have thought that Sandy would be one of the exploited? Didn't predict Sandy being a serial murderer and killing Jack. I didn't predict that, I will say. And I'm fine if a horror film ends up being straightforward and you know where it's going. It just depends if the film manages to evoke a certain feeling. But Soho couldn't make me feel anything. The movie wasn't scary, disturbing, unnerving, or psychologically interesting. So once the movie ends, there wasn't anything I could take away from it, since it failed to deliver on its messages. Don't romanticize the past. The last act felt so over the top that it was hard to take seriously. Men in power / the entertainment industry exploits women? Both ideas feel thinly explored in Soho. Compared to Perfect Blue, The Assistant, or even X, I found the discussions and character dynamics to their relevant industries more interesting than anything in Soho. And if you want to see something about men in specific, a movie like Ex Machina or Men has some genuine scares that critique men with a bit more nuance. And the only merit I can give Soho is that it's a really good looking horror movie. So if you really want a stylish horror movie whose exaggeration adds to the experience of an Anya Taylor-Joy film, go watch The Menu. But if you're a horror movie fan that wants to sink your teeth into something, there's a lot of other horror movies I'd recommend over Soho. Anyway, had a decent time with Soho, but was left kinda disappointed. See. And that's it. Wright's collection of films ranked. And what do we see? his love for media, genre bending, and a sympathy for slackers. Visually stylish, occasionally goofy, while sincere in its writing. A catalog that's both a celebration and critique of nostalgia and romanticization as we transition into grown-ups. And while these are recurring themes throughout Wright's work, each movie is very distinct from each other. They're their own stories with their own personalities, showing how versatile Wright can be within these same topics. And I love his movies for that. And besides the distinct and impressive visuals, his work is right up my alley because these themes resonate with me. And it's all packaged in a fun way that wants me to join in on the fun without needing to pander to me. And Wright's ability to make a fun movie while being able to be taken seriously is what makes him one of my favorite directors. And yeah, that's basically it. I love his work and I can't wait to see more out of the guy because he's one of my favorites. So, despite me calling him one of my favorites, you probably noticed that I haven't ranked any of his films an S rank. Why is that? Because I'm saving the best for last. Within this video contains my rules, therefore I'm labeling the S rank as the sentimental rank. While this whole list is already subject to my own biases, I still try to rank them, you know, somewhat objectively. Like, this is better for being unique within this context of film, whereas this is kinda lackluster because, you know, of this other context. But within the confines of the S tier is pure, unadulterated sentimentality. And while I think Shaun of the Dead is the best out of this list of movies, my favorite Edgar Wright movie, unsurprisingly, is Scott Pilgrim. This movie and franchise has too much sentimental value for me, so of course I can't not put it on top. It's the movie that got me into movies. I've made 2 videos dedicated to the franchise so far, and even my most popular tweet is Pilgrim related. I've got too much history with this franchise, and even if I didn't, I still think the movie is objectively great at weaving all of its like genres to create this Frankenstein of a film. So there's at least some merit there. I dare you to find another film that does everything that Scott Pilgrim does, but better. And if you do, well, whatever. F you. Well, there you go. I got to have my cake and eat it too. Hold on. Let's back up. So, I make a video connecting Wright's films. Results, nostalgia, and romanticization is comforting, but also harmful, which means you gotta grow up. Well, there you go. I got to have my cake and eat it too. Oh. This is kinda ironic. Whatever, I'll upload the video anyway, assume no one notices, and if they do, we just wait for all of this to blow over. So, thanks for watching, and thanks to my patrons for helping me make this video. As you know, YouTube's monetization is unreliable, so I appreciate the support whenever someone decides to pledge. If you are curious to see what the Patreon is like, there is a free trial period where you can download a bunch of free stuff, from the art you've seen throughout the video and the Photoshop files with all the individual layers, alongside seeing the behind the scenes stuff, while hanging out with the Discord community. And for those who don't like Patreon or subscriptions but still want to support, you can donate via Super Thanks, PayPal, or buying one of my asset packs on my Patreon. Or you can support me by also buying that guy. Anyway, thanks again for watching. It's time for the Patreon shoutouts. Shoutouts to Tom, Locke, oh god, I won't be able to say this, Yoao, oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Yao Vitor Coimbra Gomez Rodriguez, Francisca Romero, Tailored Muffin, Hunch, Kelly Quinquis, Yumi, Dan Brown, Sailor Dog, Niz, Ratlung, RQ52, Bad Randy, Jaylon JMS, Tootbot, Taboo TV Cat, Enormous98, Sylph, Keo, Seti, Ash, Trevor Hoppin, and Parker Murphy. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for watching, and thanks for the support.